ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa revealing yesterday the party will no longer tolerate corruption and that any members in the ranks could be investigated and asked to step aside. If a past track record is anything to go by, could the ANC be accused of being too quick to forgive and forget? Well, our senior politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo joins us to discuss this a bit further. Ziyanda, the one thing that came out of yesterday which was clear is that there isn't sufficient legislation which necessarily allows the ANC to do what its NEC has agreed to.
100%. And I mean, if you speak to, a political analyst such as Prince Mashele, he'll tell you that nowhere, even in the ANC constitution, does it say that one must step aside if they're accused of corruption. Of course, we know that the NEC is the highest decision-making body, excuse me, between conferences. But, if you speak to constitutional law experts, Pierre de Vos, he says, for an example, if you're absent as a councillor in the legislature for more than 15 days, you will lose your seat. What happens in Parliament then, where the entire House actually has to then vote on you being removed if you're absent for too long? Another interesting scenario which could unfold in a province such as Gauteng, where they're only a majority by one seat. What happens if Dr. Bandile Masuku does not appear for that particular sitting? They could even push for a motion to have Gauteng Premier David Makura removed. So yes, the ANC NEC may say please step aside, but there are also legal and political implications. And Prince Mashele says there's absolutely nothing the ANC could do if Zandile Gumede, Bongani Pong and others then decide that they actually don't want to step aside. And actually, let's listen into what he had to say to me earlier.
The question is, what if some of these people who are accused of wrongdoing decide that they are not going to step aside? The question is, what can the ANC do? The answer is absolutely nothing, because there is no clause in the constitution of the ANC that says leaders who are accused of wrongdoing must step aside. The ANC has a mechanism, a constitutional mechanism of dealing with wrongdoing. It's called a disciplinary process. So in other words, if you have committed wrongdoing, the ANC holds you before its disciplinary committee. So there's no room in the ANC constitution, not at least the one that I have read. Maybe there's some other one that is hidden somewhere that says leaders must step aside when they have committed some wrong. So I'm saying there is a possibility of a courageous thug in the ANC daring the leadership of the ANC and says, I am acting in accordance with the ANC, which has no room for a thing called stepping aside. What will the ANC or its leadership do to such a rogue element? My answer is no.
Listening to Prince Mashele, of course, the case of Andile Lungisa comes up, and it becomes a classic case study in terms of how the ANC could potentially handle cases of people that fit the criteria of what the NEC has been discussing over the weekend, who should rightfully step aside if the NEC decisions are to be implemented. But as we've heard from Lungisa, he's not going anywhere, and if Prince Mashele is right, there's not much else that they can do.
And even in the courts, Kathy, there's not much else they could do. Pierre de Vos was very clear to say that, these ANC members would have a case in court, especially those who occupy positions in the legislature and the National Assembly, because they cannot, the political party, any political party has very limited power in terms of what they do with their deployees. Yes, it's a political decision, but, the entire House would have to vote you out. And in the case of Gauteng, you could find yourself out of balance in terms of the number of members you have in that particular House.
So then practically, what does this mean for the ANC going forward and the administrative aspect that needs to be in place for this to be effected in the way that it was pronounced yesterday? And I suppose the next question after that would be, how long before the ANC is actually able to do what it says it's going to do?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to reflect the fact that the ANC, of course, could either suspend a member or cancel the membership of that particular member. But, if what Prince Mashele says is anything to go by, he says the correct processes still need to be followed. He says there's a disciplinary committee body that is actually there to deal with matters such as this one. And I don't see how within 15 days how the ANC could resolve the issue such as Zandile Kumetes, which is still before the courts. And of course, it's also raised the eye of the public because they're still getting paid. And so the officials themselves, I think the ANC may be relying on the fact that if someone is absent for too long and then lose their seat, they were getting paid, they would actually need to pay back that particular money. So at this point in time, it goes back to square one, which is to rely on the conscience of a particular individual.